Welcome to our Devos. We are going to close this landmine-filled discussion about boundaries with one final admonition that really should be your guiding force when it comes to how you navigate having a family. And that is, you have to let God build your family. You have to let God work in your family. In the sermon this past weekend, I talked about the secret to having a family is that you are willing to trust him enough to enable him to be responsible for your children. And as children, you have to be able to trust him enough to be able to leave so that you yourself can be entrusted to God alone and let him show you how to live your life. Family is one of God's most unimaginable callings of adventure. It really is. There's something about starting new. You know, everything that God does, it's something new. I remember my wife and I getting married. This is, still to this day, I remember us sitting, on the day after our wedding, we were on a vacation and just thinking like, this is it. Like, we're never going to be the same again. We're never going to be the way we were because now we have a whole new life. It's our life. It was a whole new adventure. Then we had our first child and it was a whole new adventure. And then we had two more and we look at this tribe of children and what we have, and it's just a whole big new adventure. And as the children get older and they start to become more independent, it's weird. And one of the messages that I'm bringing in this series is about the good old days, the myth of the good old days, and how to really capture the good old days. And it's kind of an unformulated thought, but the idea is this: the things that you kind of are irritated about, as your family matures and as they get older, you'll long for that. You really will. You'll long for it. Like I remember specifically, and it never really bothered me. And then I get, introspective a lot when I think about these things. But I talked about my father earlier. When I moved my father in with me, and I, built a little apartment for him, and I was taking care of him, and he paid a little bit of rent and helped with bills, but he loved living there. So I took care of him for years, for 10, 11, 12 years, however long he was there. And here's what ended up happening. Every time I would leave, because I traveled quite a bit for business and writing and church stuff, every time I would leave, I'm not joking, he would call me probably 3 or 4 times a day. Never called. My dad was not a talker, so he would never call just to talk. But I'd be away, and he would call me like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, what's the weather like?" And I'm like, "Oh, good." So, and then we'd hang up, and then a couple hours later, go, "Hey, so what are you up to? You're gonna have a hotel? Watch any movies in the hotel? Is there anything around you could go eat?" Like he would call 3 or 4 times. And I realized when I was away, he would be just really, really nervous. So half the time I could answer, half the time I couldn't. But a couple times I'm like, gosh, I'm working. I can't be answering these calls. Well, it's weird because one of the first trips that I had after he passed away, I was ready for that call and it didn't come. I was ready for him to call. And, I have 2 minutes, Dad. I have the hotel's good. They have continental breakfast, whatever. All hotels are the same, whatever. But it didn't happen. And then I realized, okay, this is really just an idea of God allowed me to be in that unique season where he was in a different phase of life, a different stage of life. And what happens is we get so concerned about building our life that we forget to enjoy the stages of the building. And we also forget to acknowledge that God is building these seasons into your family. And it's all seasonal. All of it is. All of it's seasonal. And that's why you have to acknowledge your faith even more, because it's going to come to an end. And how it ends, how the transition is, it's going to determine your level of mourning. When my wife and I, we were married for 10 years before we had our first child, it was weird to think that freedom that we enjoyed for that long was going to go away. And it was a seasonal change. And I remember thinking, it's weird now because, if you have little kids, you have no free time. You have no ability to have, really long conversations because the children just have no boundaries. They don't understand as they're young. And I remember thinking, I just miss those old days we could talk for hours. And now I know, as I get older, God's going to build our family in a way where we're going to miss the kids wanting to interrupt us or interact with us, or we're going to miss the kids wanting to be around us in the morning and at night. I know that some of you are in that phase right now. We're going to miss that, that spouse that oh man, it's so annoying. They snore so much. Well, maybe when they're not there, you miss that. You miss those little idiosyncrasies. And I think it's cyclical that the things that attract us to our spouses at first, we are like, oh, I love them. They're so free-spirited. I'm so, type A, and they just go by the seat of their pants. And then after a while, when you're married, those things become repulsive. Well, when they're gone, those are the things that you'll miss. But you have to allow God to build your family, and you have to grow and mature with those seasons. In Psalm 127, verse 1, it says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And family is an adventure. It's an adventure that God has called you to, whatever it is. It doesn't have to mean if you're married. It doesn't matter if you're single. It makes no difference. It's the fact that God has called you to an unimaginable journey to make an impact on other people. Some of those people, they share your blood. Some of those people, they share your roof. Some of those people, they'll share your time. But the bottom line is God wants you to share yourself. And he wants to build your family to make it look the way that he wants it to.